Hello, this is the video for Daf Ayin of Masechet Ketubot. I am Joshua Kulp. The Mishnah that begins this chapter, that begins on this page, is really a very interesting Mishnah, and it begins a series of Mishnayot that come up throughout this parak, in which a husband tries to take a vow that's going to force him to be obligated to divorce her. And the Talmud is going to ask the question and going to have some long deliberation and very forced answers as to how a husband can make a vow to get him out of an obligation that he owes to his wife. After all, we generally would imagine that someone just can't take a vow to get them out of some obligation. If so, a person could, take a vow to get him out of any obligation. So therefore, the Gemara says, no, he took it under such and such a circumstance, and it really wasn't getting him out of his obligation to provide for his wife. But the pshat, the simple sense of the Mishnah remains, and this is actually, for those of you who have read my book, Reconstructing the Talmud, this is one of those cases where I show that the pshat of the Mishnah is simply the simple reading of the Mishnah, and it is actually reflected in Second Temple sources. So I wanted to read to you some evidence for this from a book that we don't generally read together with the Talmud, but perhaps we should, and this is the New Testament. The following quote that I'm going to read for you is from the book of Mark, chapter 7, verses 9 through 13, but there's a parallel in the book of Matthew as well. And he, meaning Jesus, said to them, you have it to the Pharisees or to the Jews, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. In other words, Jesus brings up this trope that appears throughout the New Testament. You Jews are rejecting God in the Torah in favor of your own traditions, right? We should remember that Jesus is usually not portrayed as somebody who wants to abrogate the Torah, but he is often portrayed as somebody who opposes rabbinic traditions, rabbinic authority, or more precisely Pharisaic traditions and Pharisaic authority. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. That's well-known mitzvot from the Torah, that you have to respect, honor your parents, and that if you do something against them, curse them, that you are liable for the death penalty. But you say, meaning you rabbis or you Pharisees say, if a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you have gained from me is korban, meaning that is given to God. Whatever you derive from me, I'm going to turn it into a korban, something that belongs to God, and therefore you can't use it. Then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down. And many such things you do. What Jesus is accusing them here is saying that a person can use a vow, and vows often are use the formula of turning something into korban or konam or one of those words, which thereby prohibits it on another person. You rabbis are allowing a person to get out of their obligation to honor their father and mother by sustaining their mother and father, which is the normal rabbinic way of understanding how one fulfills that mitzvah. I think Jesus has a good argument, and the rabbis basically are, I'm not saying they're responding to Jesus, but they're basically respond to that ancient idea that a person can use a vow to get them out of obligations, and they say no. A person cannot make a vow to get them out of obligations, and they find technical ways of sort of getting around that understanding of the mitzvah. I just think this is a very interesting case where the Mishnah and the New Testament both bring up the same problem that rabbis and Jesus both agree is a moral problem. A person should not have the ability to use a vow to get them out of their obligations. And if we create a religious system that has such a wrinkle in it, such a problem in it, then we have to find ways of voiding that religious system. Again, you can find it in my book, Reconstructing the Talmud. It's in the introduction. I'd be happy to hear your responses to that passage and to anything in the book or anything that I talk about here on Daf Shevui.